Hi, everybody. I'm Brittany Lewis, a breaking news reporter here at Forbes. Joining me now is Bob Ward, partner and pollster at Fabrizio Ward. Bob, thanks so much for coming on.
I'm glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
I'm excited to have you on today, Bob, to talk about the AARP's latest poll, this time coming out of Montana, showing former President Donald Trump with a sizable lead against Vice President Kamala Harris. It's also showing some interesting numbers about that Senate race that could determine the balance of power in the Senate. But let's first talk about the presidential race. What are some of your takeaways?
Donald Trump won Montana by 16 points in 2020, by 20 points in 2016. This is not going to be a competitive race, as not the primary reason why we polled Montana. But it is the environment in which the other race that's happening for the Senate, will happen within, right? It is hard for a, Democratic senator to run against the tide that Donald Trump is bringing in this presidential year. John Tester last ran during a presidential election in 2012 when it was Mitt Romney versus Barack Obama. And he won that race, but he did not get 50% of the vote. He ran against Congressman Denny Rehberg, and the Libertarian in the race actually picked up enough votes that allowed Tester to beat Denny Rehberg, but it wasn't by a lot. And he's facing a challenge now. We might as well just talk about the Senate race. He's running against a challenger, Tim Sheehy, who is leading him by 8 points right now. I mean, this survey we did is a 600 sample survey in Montana. The margin of error is plus or minus 4%. These are outside the margin of error numbers right now.
So do you think as we sit here right now, 2 months away from Election Day, it is Tim Sheehy's race to lose in Montana?
It is. And let's you're right. It's 2 months away from Election Day. But 60% of the vote in Montana will be cast absentee, and that starts in a month. So actually, John Tester has less time to turn this around. And there's ways, I think, avenues for him to pursue, but it's going to be hard. But I think you're absolutely right. This is Tim Sheehy's race to lose. I think the other thing I'd point out here is that I don't live in Montana. I assume you don't live in Montana. But if you lived in Montana, you have seen a ton of ads, because Tim Sheehy is known to pretty much everyone in Montana. This guy hasn't run for office before. And there's 7% of Montana voters who either haven't heard or don't have an opinion of him, which means he's really well defined, both positively and negatively. But there's a campaign going on in Montana.
I mean, this race is crucial for the Senate. It can decide the balance of power there. So you said, for sure, obviously, this is an uphill battle for the incumbent Tester, but there are avenues he could pursue. I mean, the clock's ticking here for those avenues that he needs to pursue. What are they?
Well, so where he is doing really poorly is among older voters. Voters over 50 will make up 56% or more of the Montana electorate this year. And Tester is losing that vote by 16 points. Now, he's not going to come back and win all of those votes, but he can lessen that margin. And there's a few ways which he can do that. Social Security is an issue for older voters in Montana. There's a ton of older Montanans who say that Social Security is makes up a significant part of their income, 56%. If we talk just about seniors, that's 64% say Social Security makes up a significant part of their income. So it is, and it's an issue among, if you think Social Security is an important issue, Sheehy is ahead by 12 points. So John Tester can be on that issue and talk about ways in which he has tried to protect Social Security and will go one avenue. The other avenue is talking about long-term care. We have 25% of older Montanans who are family caregivers. There's a great article in the Wall Street Journal today, as a matter of fact, about the hardship of family caregivers and the lack of support they get. It doesn't matter if you're a Republican, Independent, or Democrat. You know, are experiencing taking care of their loved ones, and there's a cost burden and a time burden associated with that. And the candidates aren't really spending enough time talking about this. So if I'm Jon Tester and I want to get back in this race, that's another avenue where I would try to communicate to older voters where he stands on that. And again, it's bipartisan, so he can talk about it as well.
Montana obviously is a red state. Tester's an incumbent and is a Democrat. And earlier this election cycle, he said he wasn't endorsing a presidential candidate because he was focused on his race. He's closer to his Republican challenger, only 8 points away, than Harris is to Trump. So what does this indicate about Tester as a candidate?
Well, so obviously I think that's smart on Tester's part not to associate himself with Harris. But Tester is getting 41% of the vote. Harris is getting 41% of the vote. The differential in this race is that Sheehy performing Trump. And so if you look at this race, you would have to say that the upside is on Sheehy's side of the equation rather than Tester's. And so that doesn't bode well for Jon Tester. But he's actually running even with Harris right now. And so his distancing of Harris doesn't seem to be paying off. He is maximizing the Democratic vote. There's not much more Democrat, and there's not a lot of Democrats in Montana. There's 1 out of 4 Montana voters are Democrats. The biggest plurality is independents, who make up 38% of the electorate. And Tester's ahead among them. He is ahead among independents by, let me just check the data, by 3 points. He's got to do a lot better than that to be competitive against he also needs to pick up a few more Republican votes. He's getting 7% of the Republican vote. He really needs to add a few more because he's tapped out on Democrats right now.
I want to read a number and get your thoughts on it. The poll found that 25% of voters over 50 are not straight ticket voters. Are older voters, to this extent, usually not down ballot voters? Is this surprising? Did that stick out to you?
Yeah, no, I think it is a bit of a surprise. Throughout, so the way we decide who's a swing voter, we ask the Senate race in 2 different ways. Include all the third-party candidates, and then we do a head-to-head. We ask the presidential race head-to-head. We ask governor's race, and Governor Gianforte is well ahead. And we also ask how they're voting for Congress. There's 2 congressional districts in Montana. And so we have a number of races where people can say, here's how I'm voting. And so if you're a straight ticket Republican on all those races, we set you aside. And if you're a straight ticket Democrat on all those races, we set you aside. 25% of older voters in Montana are in that middle. And what's interesting about them is they are really economically focused. They prioritize Social Security more than Republicans and Democrat straight ticket voters do. And so, it is unusual to see that, but it means that, the campaign, like Jon Tester's campaign, can really go in and talk about the issues that are important to them. And as I mentioned, Social Security and economic issues generally are what's on the minds of the swing voters in Montana.
I know you said you don't live in Montana. I certainly don't either. But I am curious, do you think, since you're saying Social Security is that sweet spot, these independent voters really care about it, those older voters really care about it, is Jon Tester, do you think right now, doing enough talking about that issue specifically?
He obviously has to do a lot more. I'm not following all of the ads that he's running and what he's talking about. I did a radio interview out there, and there was an ad attacking Tim Sheehy during the commercial break. Poor Montanans are being saturated by ads right now, but this is an area where I think he needs to lean in a little bit more. I know neither of the candidates are probably talking about family caregiving, and so there are these issues that are big and important that could connect with voters that they could do a better job talking about.
So between now and Election Day, and even closer when mail-in ballots start in about a month, what you said, what are you specifically looking out for?
Well, Again, Tester has to continue running as a centrist to disassociate himself, I think, with a campaign, because the people he need to pick up are not his own partisans. He has them. And so looking for him to run a more independent campaign, but also on, getting messaging out there to the people who are going to decide this election. And that is going to be the older voters. One thing we haven't talked about is who's motivated to vote. And so while we know older voters do show up and historically are the majority of the electorate, we predict it'll be 56% of the electorate. It might be higher than that, because when we ask on a 10-point scale, how motivated are you to vote? It's the seniors who are saying 10 out of 10 that they are, extremely motivated to vote. 92% say 10 out of 10. You compare that to those who are under 50, it's only 77%. And if you look at those who are 18 to 34, it's 65%. So there's a big gap in motivation. And so I'll be looking for Tester to be talking to older voters, and Sheehy for that matter, to compete for those voters who are going to show up, not just in November, but again, starting in a month, because Montana really, like I said, most people will be voting by mail in Montana.
Well, we are certainly keeping our eye out on Montana, especially on that Senate race. Bob Ward, per usual, thank you for coming on, talking about the poll, breaking it down for us. I'm already looking forward to the next one. Thanks for joining me.